In this video, we're going to be looking at the top 10 worst Labyrinth of Nightmare cards ever to be released. If you have not done so already, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see future videos. So number 10 on this list goes to Scroll of Bewitchment. Scroll of Bewitchment has a very simple effect as an equipped spell card, and it says select one attribute. Change the attribute of the equipped monster to the one you select. Very simple, right? Also, very bad. In many cases, if you want to change the attribute of a monster, the simplest solution is to just play a monster of that attribute instead. In other words, run cards of that attribute instead of actually running a specific equipped spell just to change the attribute of a monster, which in most cases, changing the attribute alone isn't exactly going to make wonders happen. In addition to that, there's actually better cards that really just change attributes or even types generally for all monsters on the field. Cards such as DNA Transplant and DNA Surgery are a lot more effective for that matter. You see, if you're ever going to do something as simple as just changing types or attributes, in other words, cards that can technically make you go -1 just for that, you want to make sure you use cards that are a little bit more universal or general and not just focus on one card to target from an equipped spell card, because it's just way too underpowered in that case. And that's why this card is number 10 on this list. Number 9 on this list goes to Deal a Phantom. It's a normal trap card that basically says that you can select one face-up monster on the field and you get to increase that targeted monster's attack by 100 points for each monster in your graveyard only until the end of this turn. So because the card is a trap card, you may initially think, oh, that means you can use it when your opponent is attacking into a monster, so you get to destroy it during that battle if your attack goes beyond the attack of the opponent's monster, correct? Well, yes, but you know what other card has a much better effect? Well, there's a card known as Rush Recklessly, which is a quick play spell card that always guarantees that a target gets 700 attack. In other words, if there's 7 monsters or less in your graveyard, this card is actually worse, because it's a trap card, not a quick play spell card that you can also flexibly use on your turn when you draw it, as opposed to waiting on just the following turn. And if there's more than 7 monsters, yes, the attack is actually bigger than Rush Recklessly, but by that point, is it really going to make that much of a difference in terms of increasing your attack by like 900 versus 700 on a Rush Recklessly? 9 out of 10 times, it's not going to matter. And this is why this card is just way too underpowered. It's way too specific in terms of what potential power it can reach, and that's why it's just never going to reach that potential power, and it's just way too underpowered. Number 8 on this list goes to Collected Power. This card is another normal trap card that says that you get to target one face-up monster on the field, and you get to equip with all equipped cards on the field. But if any of those equipped cards are now equipped to an incorrect target, then those equipped cards get destroyed. So basically it's kind of all for one. If there's a bunch of equipped cards on the field, just imagine that they're all going to go into one target. So there's a number of problems with this card, with the biggest one being that really how often are equipped cards used nowadays? The answer is very rarely. And even then, it's not like players use equipped cards that gain a bunch of attack or defense to a target, because they simply don't. The majority of equipped cards actually revive stuff now from the graveyard, which makes things very different and really makes this card not all that useful, because it's just way too weak. If the whole purpose of this card is really to just target one of your own monsters in order to give it a bunch of attack with all these powerful equips on the field, then there's a huge problem with it. Because there's a lot more better and more productive ways if you want to beat over your opponent's monsters, like, I don't know, maybe destroying them with a Raigeki or something, I don't know, just a thought. But yeah, that's why this card is just way too weak, because it's just too specific and really it does not shine at all. Number 7 on this list goes to Jam Breeding Machine. This one is a continuous spell card that says that during each of your standby phases, you get to special summon one slime token with relatively weak stats in attack position specifically. And while this card is active, you cannot summon any monsters, including special summoning, except for the slime tokens, but you can set monsters. The limitations of this card are just way too big for what it actually does. Now yes, generating tokens once per turn can be a good thing, because that does give you some fodder for going into extra deck summons, but the issue is that you can't even use extra deck summons or really even tribute them for some kind of tribute summon while the card is face up, which is a huge problem because it defeats the overall purpose of you trying to use these tokens. It's not like you would use this and just rely on those tokens to attack your opponent because it's only 500 per token. Way too weak and underpowered. The other issue with it is the fact that it's only during each of your standby phases. It would be one thing if when you activate this card, it said something along the lines of like, maybe once per turn during your main phase you can special summon one slime token with the same limitations of course of not summoning monsters. Yes, the card will still be bad, but at least you get to activate it, put a token, and then maybe somehow find some kind of way to destroy the card by using some kind of card that destroys all spell and traps on the field, and then using that token as some kind of fodder for something. That would be a little different. It would still be weak and way too convoluted because essentially you're using way too much just to summon one damn token on the field, but at least you can make some plays with it. For this one, you have to wait until your next turn to start summoning tokens. Horribly bad, and as a fun fact, it's also one of the worst token generator cards ever to be released. Just throwing that out there. Number 6 on this list goes to Gadget Soldier. So Gadget Soldier, well, once again we're going back into those regular vanilla monsters, right? This one is a level 6 monster with 1800 attack and 2000 defense. I don't really need to say more other than this card has really bad stats for a tribute monster, as by this point there were actually already several other cards that were released that were definitely a lot better than this card that had at least 1800 attack. Also, as a fun fact, because it does say Gadget in the name, it actually does have some gadget support for cards that specifically say Gadget because they don't specifically say excluding Gadget Soldier, so that's a little interesting. So yes, it has gadget support, but it's still useless. Number 5 on this list goes to Spirit of the Breeze. So this one here is a card that has 0 attack and 1800 defense, and the effect says that as long as this card remains in face-up attack position on your side of the field, you get to increase your life points by 1000 points during each of your standby phases. So in other words, you have to put this card with 0 attack in face-up attack position and then wait until your next standby phase to gain 1000 life points. Or you can just not be a complete idiot and play another weak card on this Dying Catcher the Cure Master if you want your 1000 points, instead of risking it to make it to your next standby phase to get 1000 points by putting this monster with 0 attack in attack mode. This card makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It really does not. Its defense is respectable, I guess, but even then, there were already plenty of cards that already had 2000 defense that were occasionally played just to give you better defense. But if you put it in defense mode, it's essentially a vanilla monster because its effect is useless, as you're not going to be gaining 1000 life points every standby phase. So by that point, if you're playing it for defense, in other words vanilla, just play a 2000 defense monster because those things were plentiful during this time. I'd be shocked if anybody ever even got this effect to trigger once because that's unbelievable. Number 4 on this list goes to Cyclone Laser. So this one is a specific equip spell card for a monster known as Gradius. Essentially, you can only equip it to Gradius, and if you do, Gradius gets 300 points of attack. And also, when Gradius attacks a monster in defense mode, you get to inflict piercing battle damage. And that's it. First of all, it's a card that only works on one card in the game, Gradius, which is a vanilla monster with 1200 attack, which means with this card, it would go up to 1500 attack, and it would get piercing. You see, cards that have piercing need to have really high attack, not 1500, because that's just way too low. Also, you know what other card actually works for pretty much any monster in the game, but also gives more points of attack? It's a card known as Big Bang Shot, that actually can be equipped to any monster, and it grants 400 points of attack and piercing to the equipped monster. Now yes, the card has a downside that if the card is essentially removed, then the card is banished, meaning the monster, as opposed to being sent to the graveyard, but honestly, it's a downside that's very minimal compared to Cyclone Laser, and that's why this card is just really trash and really horrible because it's too specific and it doesn't even have a powerful effect for working on only one specific monster. Number 3 on this list goes to Lightning Conger. So Lightning Conger is a vanilla monster that's level 3 with 350 attack and 750 defense. So when it comes to Labyrinth of Nightmare, there's actually several other monsters that also have really bad stats that are vanillas, cards like Flame Dancer for example. But the thing is that this one is just the worst of the worst, because of its very awkward stats of attack and defense, in addition to its combination of water and thunder. It just makes it a really bad card. There's not really much else I need to say about this card other than please never run it, because when it comes to vanillas, this thing is just awkward as hell and really has no use whatsoever. Even weak cards that are like maybe Fiend or Warrior at least maybe have a little more utilization because of their type, but this one just clearly does not. Yeah, don't run this ever, it's one of the worst vanillas I've ever seen in my entire life. Number 2 on this list goes to Chosen One. Chosen One is a normal spell card that says that you get to select 1 monster card and 2 non-monster cards from your hand, and then your opponent will randomly select 1 card among them, and if it's the monster card, you get to special summon it and send the other 2 to the graveyard, and if it's not the monster card, then you send all 3 cards to the graveyard. Essentially, this card is a 1/3 chance to get you that 1 monster that you want to summon onto the field, and even if you do, you still lose 2 cards plus activating Chosen One, thus going -3. And if the 2/3 66% chance happens, you go -4 and don't even summon that monster, thus you basically lost the game. So basically it's a gamble card, and it's one of the worst gamble cards because the chances are just way too slim. There's plenty of other ways to summon powerful monsters from your hand, but one of the most common ways is just send them to the graveyard and then summon them from there. This card is just way too specific in terms of what it can achieve, and really, even if you summon the monster, you're still at a huge disadvantage, so it's almost kind of like a pick your poison kind of thing. Poison or poisoner, and the poison is not a good option as well, so this card will just honestly make you suffer a lot more than really giving you any benefit, so it's really bad. And lastly, the number 1 worst card in Labyrinth of Nightmare is Fire Sorcerer. Now I will be very clear, obviously this card is technically better than other cards I mentioned like Lightning Congerer because this card at least has better stats, but I'm kind of switching this up a little bit to just kind of really emphasize and highlight really horrible effects, and this effect is just so horrible in so many ways. Like, it's bad. It's very bad. So this one here is a Fire Spellcaster monster with 1000 attack and 1500 defense. It has a flip effect that when it's flipped, you, not optionally, but you have to randomly select 2 cards from your hand and banish them to inflict 800 damage to your opponent. Now here's the thing, if this card actually said flip, inflict 800 damage to your opponent, it still wouldn't be a very good card. It would actually have a very mediocre and underpowered flip effect of only causing 800 damage, basically an Ukazi, but as a flip effect, thus waiting 1 more turn to Ukazi the opponent. However, the fact that on the flip, you have to basically banish, not discard to the graveyard, but actually banish 2 cards, and let me emphasize, randomly, meaning you don't get to choose. So you don't get to choose the 2 cards you are going to banish and not send to the graveyard to inflict 800 damage to your opponent. That is one of the worst costs I have ever seen in my entire life. It's ridiculous. As a fun fact, certain decks actually used this card because it was so bad, but not for themselves, but actually for the opponent. You see, there's a card called Reverse Reuse that says you get to target up to 2 flip monsters in your graveyard and special summon them to your opponent's side of the field in face up or face down defense position. Which means if you use this card and select Fire Sorcerer face down on your opponent's side of the field, if you find a way to flip it, you can actually just take 800 damage for randomly banishing 2 cards in your opponent's hand, which is honestly such a powerful effect in that way that it's really crazy. But if you think about it, if you get to flip this card, like literally flip its effect, paying 800 life points as a cost to randomly banish 2 cards from your opponent's hand would be so broken in so many ways. The reason why it's not banned at all is because you have to use reuse recycle, which is actually a multi-step process, which takes a lot of time. But the point is that the effect is just so horrible that yes, some decks actually use this, but to mess with the opponent instead rather than yourself. And you know that a card is absolutely horrible when really it's better to just give it to your opponent so you get to mess with it. And that right there is the top 10 worst Labyrinth of Nightmare cards ever to be released. Once again, as a reminder, if you have not done so already, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see any future videos. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye everyone, have a great and of course a fantastic day.